Abigail. What are we talking about today?
We are talking about the hand-in-hand parenting tool called Staylistening. And what is it? And when might we want to use it? And when sometimes we might not want to use it.
Yeah, it depends where you are, I think, how open you can be to stay listening. And I know that some people, when they hear about it, take to it immediately and love the idea. But for others, it's a little harder. I know it was for me.
Yeah, I like that idea of like, it depends where you are, like physically and emotionally.
Yes, absolutely. Hi, I'm Elle Kwan in Hong Kong, and I'm your host of the Hand in Hand podcast. We're a non-profit from San Francisco operating globally, and we decode children's difficult behaviors one parenting challenge at a time.
And I'm Abigail Wald, founder of realtimeparenting.com, and I'm also a certified hand-in-hand parenting instructor. And every week, Elle and I like to take a look at one facet of parenting from the hand-in-hand parenting perspective and take a look at how it looks in our real lives, our real lives, your real lives, the real lives of the parents we come in contact with, and just wonder about it together. So today we're looking at stay listening.
So for anyone who has not come across this tool, do you want to just quickly explain what stay listening is?
Sure. Stay listening is actually a very simple and yet kind of radical tool. It really is what it sounds like. It's staying and listening. But it's about really having the compassion to really hear what your child is saying to you in those moments of distress. Often as parents, we kind of want to jump in, like we see our child hurting or upset, and we want to go in and fix it, or maybe it triggers us and we're getting angry that they're upset. And in both cases, like our feelings wind up getting to be kind of the focus of the event instead of actually just making space for a child to have their feelings and meeting them in there kind of quietly and keeping them, letting them know that they're safe, keeping them kind of held either physically or just emotionally, and we'll talk about that, and saying as few words as possible.
Yeah, I think it's that idea of just, staying and listening through an upset, right? Without going to that almost natural seeming mechanism of, oh, shh, or stop crying, you're fine, or it's okay. Even that is kind of saying, come on, hush now. You can get over this. Or even, I don't know, like, how was it in your house? Did you get told to stop crying? Like pull your socks up and stop crying kind of thing?
Gosh, I don't remember. I remember crying alone a lot. I remember wanting to cry alone. So it must not have felt safe. I think I got yelled at if I cried. I've actually never wondered about this.
That's
funny.
Interesting. I've wondered about it a lot. And
really?
I think I was a crier. I know I was a crier, and I see it in my kids. We joke about it because even when I met my husband, I was a crier. And it's big and dramatic. It's like I'm you can probably tell I'm kind of like a bit floaty, not much gets to me, but then when it really gets to me, that's it. And my kids are similar. But what I remember was my poor mum. I don't mean to dish you, mum, but I think she just got to the point where she was like, again? And so there's a lot of me in my memories of just throwing myself on my bed and just crying into the pillow. So yeah, I was alone a lot as well. I wasn't told to be quiet. I don't remember anyway, but I was definitely out on my own with it if I was upset.
I remember angry tears. Like angry, feeling misunderstood, like not wanting to share my tears. Like, you're not worth my tears. Like, I don't trust you with my tears. I remember that feeling.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting to delve back into how, how you do process your emotions and how you did as a kid too.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so interesting. I had somebody, I was talking to them about, for boys, this idea of actually, one of my sons recently was told, like, you're too old to cry, right?
Yeah.
And I think he was 8 at the time. And I remember thinking like, and somebody who has a girl was telling me that what drives her nuts is she's had her girl cry in public and people come up and say, oh, you're too pretty to cry.
Really?
Yeah.
I haven't heard that one.
Yeah. That.
Well, listen,
yeah.
so why do we think it's great to cry? What are the benefits before I tear up now?
So, the benefits of being able to cry are actually a lot. I mean, one of them is just, I don't know if you can think of a time when you've had like a really good cry yourself, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes, again, we've talked about the brain science actually pretty recently. So if any of you guys are interested in that, you can just look up one of our prior episodes. But, when you're flooded with all those feelings, you really can't think clearly. It's like not a choice. You're not being difficult. Like you just can't. And as you cry, it kind of almost like literally washes some of that out of you. It just like all those hurts pile up, pile up, pile up. And some of us are good at suppressing them and some of us aren't. Yeah. And not to say that suppressing it is better. It's just some of us are good at suppressing it. And so whether you're someone who suppresses it or not, either way, it's kind of in the way, And until you get it out, and especially out in the presence of someone who cares. So not just alone, but actually to be heard and witnessed. It's a very special feeling to be able to do that.
I remember that happening once I had developed really good friendships. And that was early teens, probably. I was lucky. I had a few really, really good friends that you could be honest with. Thank goodness I found them. And I think some are listening. You know who you are. And, I could cry freely with them and they could cry freely with me, I hope. And it might not have been exactly how we say is most beneficial, which is, to use as few words as possible and just acknowledge that person is going through something but will find their way. I don't think we had that knowledge with it, but it was fine to go, you're crying, you're upset. And the difference in crying that way to being banished and crying, or crying because you had nowhere else to go, nothing else to do, that was huge.
Yeah. It's really powerful. It's really healing to have the safe space to say anything you want and get it all out. I mean, it's kind of what we do in our listening partnerships, right? I mean, that's the peer-to-peer listening where really we're getting stay listened, right? It's kind of like a combination of stay listening and special time. And
it's so funny you say that, because only recently one of my children was just losing it, saying some crazy stuff, to my ears, saying some crazy stuff. And that thought totally ran through my mind that I'd had a good few crying sessions in listening partnerships, and it suddenly went, oh, this is the same. And actually that recognition gave me that extra kind of space for them. I was able to go, oh, I get what's happening for you right now. That happened to me,
Yeah, it's
but this
so
is quite
helpful.
a few years into me having done Stay Listening and being involved with Hand in Hand. So I was actually shocked that came that late into the process. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I think it takes a long time. I mean, I think, first of all, one of the things to acknowledge is that some kids cry in easier ways than other kids.
Right.
And by the way, what's easy for one parent might not be easy for another parent, right? So it also depends on your triggers and your restimulation points as a parent. So, for some people, like some kids go to grief really easily, and that can just look like crying and sobbing and real, like sharing with you of their pain, And then some kids actually go more to anger. They kind of don't go through grief as much. It's like grief that comes out as anger. And that can be harder because it can get really physical and kind of tougher for a parent and sometimes more re-stimulating.
I remember because my son goes to anger quite a lot. And there's times, it sounds awful to say, but when he's crying, like that grief that you just mentioned, it's almost the way you access the caring and the soothing element of motherhood feels easier to me, than when he's actually like kicking or, yelling at me to get away. That's much harder for me to listen to.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually feel the same way. I have an easier time with grief than anger. Anger sort of kicks me into my fight or flight a little bit. And so I've had to really teach myself not to over the years, which I've successfully been able to do. And it's been an amazing process to get there. But, I should say like 95% successfully, but I'm going to call that a success.
I think you get a pass rate.
We're gonna go with that. But it's really interesting because there are people for whom the grief is harder. If you grew up with someone who was always in grief, or you grew up around deep sorrow, or you're someone who perceives that kind of experience as weakness. Sometimes for some parents, that grief is actually harder to deal with than the anger. So it really depends on the child's manifestation of grief and sorrow and upset, and also on the parents' re-stimulation points.
Yeah, we had someone write in recently. She was having a challenge because I think she had 3 kids, but the 2 of them that she was talking about, one was a crier, but one was a screamer. And she just found it a lot harder to deal with that high-pitched screaming that was going on. And, I said it is hard because, these sounds affect you in different ways. But ultimately, your child is really finding the best way for them to let off steam, which is, let go of their tensions, get their worries and fears out. And it can be so hard when they're so different like that, and you find one easier. She was feeling bad that she couldn't approach them in the same way.
And that's why we wanted to do this show, because we wanted to say that, like, yes, that classic stay listen is a child is crying or tantruming, and we come by them and we listen and we're really open and we are on their side, and maybe we're gently touching their back or putting a hand on their leg and letting them know how much we care, and we're using very few words, and it's just oof, oh, they don't want to be friends with you anymore. Oh, wow, that feels hurtful. Yeah. And you're just kind of repeating their words, and you're just with them, and you're not trying to fix it. And the child cries and cries and cries until they kind of come to a peak, a natural crest, and then their brain comes back on because they've been able to get out all that yuck. And then they're like, oh, I think I'll just sit with my other new friend at lunch tomorrow. I actually like her better anyway. And then you get to sort of say, yay, that was a perfect little stay listen. It worked perfectly, right? But
I think you get to pat you both on the back. Oh, you handled that wonderfully, and so did I. Brilliant, right? Like parent goals.
Right, but it doesn't always look that way. And we just really wanted to make space, do an episode for when it does not look like that.
Go to plan,
Yeah, because
when it's not a textbook statement.
Yeah, so I can tell you I've had a few of those in 10 years, but that's not, actually that is relatively what my younger son will do. He actually stay listens pretty much like that. Or he gets upset like that, and I stay listen to him like that, and that's what it looks like for the most part. Some variation of that, usually ending with actually a play listen. Like he'll do something silly towards the end, and I'll pick up on it, and we'll kind of play listen our way out of the stay listen. And so I'm not trying to distract him out of it. It's just he gives me like a signal that he's like ready to come out. you know?
He gives you a signal, like what? He'll give you like a little smile, or what? How does it
It
look?
could be a smile. It could be, you know, like in our Halloween podcast when I say he just likes like, do you know how fish eat? You know, or, you know, different kinds of just sort of like invitations that are, you know, usually kind of like sullen and sulky with a little smirk of like, do you dare play with me? Like, you know, that's usually how they're wrapped. Yeah, and then I'll play and, you know, we'll sort of bounce back and forth. And again, I'm not trying to end the stay listen. I'm just meeting him where he is, you know?
Right. I think so much of it is about that, isn't it? I know that sometimes it can be hard for kids, even if you look at them when they're upset. You know, they don't want to meet your eye when they're upset.
Yes.
And yet, you know, in your bid to connect, that's like a real go-to move for some people, right?
Yeah. And I think that's really hard because some kids don't want you there and some kids don't want you to look at them. And for some kids, they get kind of violent if you stay too close.
Yeah.
And I
And
think
then their upset moves into something else, doesn't it? It's not really letting go. It's caught up in something else, it feels like then.
Yeah, I think we can almost get in the way. But it's complicated because, you know, you kind of have to feel it out. Like sometimes you want to push that because you need to almost set a limit, right? Usually setting a limit is what causes a lot of stay listens. And so sometimes the limit is just, I'm going to be here with you because if I go away, you can ignore and suppress your feelings. But if I'm here, you're going to feel your feelings. And that might make them feel mad because they don't want to feel their feeling. And so you kind of have to trust your best judgment as a parent in that moment of like, it's okay if that makes them upset because that's what they need right now, you know, like is to flush that feeling. But sometimes it is about, you know, when a child is really upset or angry or they're sensitive sort of sensorially and they're already flooded and then even just your quiet presence might be too overwhelming for them. And so I think sometimes we have to stay just far enough that there's a little bit of space and just close enough that they always know we're there. And so I like to call those like drive-bys. So my older son needed a lot of drive-bys where it was like, I'm here, and he'd kind of get violent and I'd be like, I love you and I really want to be here for you. I don't want you here. I get that. Well, you know, I want to honor your need for space and, you know, but I'd be like right
that's
there.
One battle that can be so confusing when your child is, you know, I hate you, get out, I don't want you to be here. And you're like, but I've just got this new approach and this tool says that I must stay close and offer my connection. And you're just standing there like in this quandary of like, you know, this approach is also about like respecting your child and listening to them. And so what do you do then?
Yeah.
So you drive by.
Yeah, I suggest drive-bys and finding kind of like, it's like a lot of things with kids. I think, you know, you find that sort of like, I call it the yoga edge, like where you're stretching and it's like enough of a stretch that you feel it. It's not so little that you don't feel it, but it's not so much that you hurt yourself. So it's like you find that perfect edge of how close can I be that I'm still helping you feel your feelings and letting you know you're safe, but I'm not so close that the experience is just flooding you with rage.
We had a time recently, I was confused. Just my son, when he was, I would be trying to listen to him and he would be crying. And it would be, you know, maybe I would set a limit. Well, you know, anyone who listens to this regularly knows that, you know, we have trouble around dinner time. So it could be, you know, I'll set a limit and say, you know, it's time for dinner, let's go eat. And he would go into his tantrum, you know, and I would be listening. And then just out of nowhere, he would be like, and you you don't buy me presents for my birthday. No, you won't. You don't. I don't want presents, and no one should buy them for me. Or he'd do it around Christmas. Like, Santa shouldn't come. Like, he shouldn't bring me presents. And I was like, what? What has this got to do with dinner, for one? And also, you know, for Stay Listening to, we talked about the brain science a little while ago, and basically we know that, you know, the talking, the reasoning part of the brain is in shutdown when someone's upset. And so I was really stuck. I was like, okay, are you trying to wade out of the feelings by engaging in this conversation? How should I respond to this kind of conversation? You know, I was stuck.
It's such a sweet moment. I mean, and I get it's also hard and frustrating, but it's also really sweet. Like, I actually, my sense of that, and again, I'm not in the room, so you know, you're the one who would know. But just hearing it is not so much that he's avoiding that conversation with you and changing tactics. It seems like he's almost digging in to the real feeling that he has of, I should be punished right now. There's something wrong with me. I'm bad. And that's a feeling kids often struggle with. And, you know, it comes from everywhere, from school, from stories, you know, I mean, the whole Santa story too, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you're good, you get this. And if you don't, you know, so there's so much, you know, good and bad and right and wrong. And they hear it at school. And so sometimes those feelings about I'm not coming to the dinner table, like, can just be that broken cookie pretext of, I really need to talk to you about these feelings I'm having about me not being worthy. Right? And so that's why those stay listens, it's so valuable to just listen and just be there, and wherever they go, right? So if he goes there, and not to be afraid to play in a stay listen too, right? Like, you know, I think sometimes when people first learn about stay listening and they're stay listening all the time, it reminds me of like those, you know, college romances you had where it's like 2 a.m. and you're like, let's talk about the meaning of life while we gaze into each other's eyes, and also discuss like the astronomy that is actually currently happening above our face, you know? And like, dude, I'm just trying to buy some potato chips. Like, you know, it's like I think that there's like a certain heaviness to all of the knowledge that can happen sometimes early on. And
well, especially when you're into it and you realize, wow, it's good for them. Oh, I've been doing this wrong. Now I'm going to let them cry as much as possible. You can't slip into that, right? Let's get all this out. I've been ignoring it.
Yeah. And I think, you know, for one like that, like, to remember to maybe bring play, right? Like, we could sort of come to him and be like, you know, like, oh, should we not buy you any presents at all? But nothing? Oh, but goodness, you're so lovely. There have been so many presents waiting for you, and nothing at all, huh? Oh, you're terrible. Oh, goodness. Can you tell me how terrible you are? Because I happen to love terrible little boys. Yes. They're my favorite. Right? You know, anything to sort of pour love on him and be playful, but also still not acknowledging what he's going through and what he's feeling, right?
You're basically vocalizing and being physical and saying, I love you anyway, right?
Yeah, you know, through play, but also making space for, yeah, I felt that way too sometimes. Yeah, right? Because there's a real feeling under it. And I think that's the beauty of stay listening, is often a child will start crying about the pink cup at the table, and the next thing you know, if you really listen and don't get too involved, it becomes about something else entirely. Right?
Yeah. It's never about the pink cup.
Yeah.
But I mean, how do you've got some older kids, like, how does it work later up the ladder kind of thing?
Well, we just had a very big stay listen in my house. my older son, and we actually go really into this on the Parent Footprint podcast with Dr. Dan. So if any of you want to hear the full long version of this story, you're welcome to listen to that.
Oh, I'll link to it. I'll link to it, Abigail, in the show
Okay,
notes.
great. So my older son, who is 10, he has been going to, so I grew up in a religious home, and I'm not particularly religious, but I'm very, or I'm not particularly observant, but I definitely am spiritual, and I do have a lot of tie to certain things, and so I had really wanted for my son to go to religious school, and he has been going for the last couple of years and just hates it, like really deeply hates it, like hates it so much that I can't even begin to tell you how awful it's been for him. Oh, no. And so every week, we go twice a week, and it's like just a complaint all the time. And for some reason over the last couple of weeks, it's reached a real fever pitch. And this last Saturday, I was standing there and I was like, hey, babe, it's time. And he would not come. And he does not usually cry. He is not a crier. He's an angrier. And he was like, I'm not coming. And I was like, no, you are going. It's time, right? And I was setting the limit like I've always said. And he's like, I'm not going. I was like, I know, babe. I know it's really hard to get ready. We got to go, right? And this is like sort of our routine. Just like a couple times a week. This is what we do. It's just like, So we just have this conversation, and this time he just put his foot down, and he was in the bathroom, and he was like, I am not going. And I just kind of saw something different in him, and I took a moment and I had to listen, and it was really hard for me and really re-stimulating because it's such a long, deeper story. And again, you guys should really go listen to the Dr. Dan podcast, because that's where we really go into this. But
the full-length version.
Yeah. It's actually a pretty amazing story, but really ultimately, it was very hard for me because I felt like my dad died 10 years ago. This would have been so important to him. My son has gone through all these surgeries that I'm very grateful to God for. My son doesn't. It's not part of his worldview. I don't know that he thinks there is no God, but he's certainly not interested in learning about one if there is. And it's just, this is not of interest to him. And he's had all these heart surgeries. And so, it was very interesting because he mentioned, this isn't how I want to spend my life. This isn't what I want to do with my time. And the way he said it really struck this just very deep chord in me, where I looked at him and I thought, like, wow. And I sort of said, I need to understand, like, what's happening there. Is there something horrible happening? He was like, no, I just hate it. And I had to take aside everything I wanted him to love and everything I wanted to be meaningful for him, and realize that, like, it was my job to listen to him in this moment, and that what I was trying to accomplish was not achieving the goal. Like, if anything, it was going to make him hate it all more. And I had to put aside my own re-stimulation of my father who passed away and what I wanted to give my father, and, all of that in the face of this child who is alive, who's telling me what he wants in his life, right? And it was pretty intense. I don't know if I'm able to really describe all of that, but it was kind of an amazing moment where I really had to listen to all the feelings that were coming up for me. And I kind of tried to express some of it to him of how hard this was for me. But at one point he said, I think it was before he sort of this moment, but at one point he looked at me, he was like, you're not listening to me, which of course was like the hardest thing in the world for me to hear. Right. And I was like, no,
that's my job and my life's work.
Yeah, exactly. He knows how to cut to the bone. And I looked at him, but it was great that he said that, because it really made me go, okay, Abigail, really listen, like really listen, And when I heard him say what he said about his time, it felt so intense to me. It was almost like I don't know how long he's going to be here. Who knows how long any of us are going to be here. I don't know what his soul knows about that. But I do know that he's also got a different experience of his own mortality because of everything he's been through. And much more so than any other 10-year-old, who's never lain on a table fighting for their life multiple times, And so I really took it in.
That in some way.
Yeah. And I said to myself, like, my job is to listen to this person coming into their independence. And my job is to parent the child I have, and to hear him. And he was kind of like brimming back tears at this point. And I just really looked at him, opened my heart, and I said, okay, so, I thought to myself, how can I hold on to my values while still listening to him? So I said, well, we won't go anymore. We won't go. But if we don't go, I hear you telling me that this isn't what you want to do with your life. So what do you want to do with your life? And the 2 days we used to go, one of those days will follow your passion and find out what you want to do with your life. And, it doesn't have to be the rest of your life. It's just what do you want to do with today's version of your life. And, but it should be meaningful, right? It should matter to you. It should be what you want to do with your time, right? And if you don't know what that is, we'll look, right? And the other part of the week that we would have been there, we'll do some sort of community service, something for other people outside of yourself. And that was how I thought, I can still hold on to my values while I listen to you, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a different example of, it was stay listening with a much older child. And it was a little different too, because it was problem solving together, right?
Yeah.
But he was having huge feelings that I feel like if I hadn't taken the moment to really listen and really care and get on his side, I almost feel like I could have lost him for his teenage years. Do you know, he would kind of in a way never have forgiven me, or at least hopefully I've truly earned a piece of major trust going forward,
And I think that is what stay listening is, isn't it? It's saying, I can cope with you. I can cope with your feelings, which means you are good enough. You are what I want, what I love, and I will be here for you. That's what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And we all need that space. I mean, parents too. It's why we have listening partnerships, right? We all need that space to go, I'm awful, I'm yucky, let me tell you why I'm horrible. And, and have somebody just be there, still loving us and believing in us. It's a really powerful thing.
Yeah. Great. Well, I guess that seems like a good place to close, right? Did we cover everything?
I think so. I mean, I think we just wanted everyone to know that, this stay listening thing, it's yours to build and it's yours to write however it works in your family. Yeah. It's just take the spirit of it and find it. And, just one last thing, which I know comes up a lot, which is what if my child hits during stay listening? And that really gets into limit setting, and just to let them know that I'm here for you and I can't let you hit me, and it's okay. I've got you. I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen. I'm strong enough to take care of us both, and I'm here for you. And it's okay that you're angry. It's okay you want to hit me. I'll make sure that you don't do that so that you don't feel bad later. And so I'm not hurt. I've got this, that kind of an energy. And then just, sometimes I'll tell, I used to have to tell my son, stay here on this couch and I'll be right here. Because he would say, I don't want you to hold me. But then he would come attack me. And so I would say, well, if you come and hit me, I'll know it means you do want me to hold you, right? And if you truly want your space, like you're saying, then you can have your space, but I need you not to hit me, right? And if you're hitting me, that's fine. It just means I'll have to hold you, right? To keep us both safe. And so he would kind of go back and forth for a while until he would kind of find himself and figure out, sometimes he did want me to hold him and sometimes he did want his space, and he could figure that out and sort of modulate that for himself, knowing that all options were open, I was just listening to what he needed. And so that sometimes is a way to handle it if your child gets really physical. And you might come up with other great, fabulous ways, and do write in and let us know.
You should let us know. Yeah. And if you have questions, just shoot them out. We're definitely more active on the Facebook page. I know we did miss some questions earlier. We are on there. We're checking. Let us know questions if you have them. You know what? I think I will put a link as well about Stay Listening for anyone who's not that familiar with it. But if you are and you're seeing it play out in your family, either you're using the tool or you're not sure how to use it with your family, or it's not doing what you thought it would do, try our starter class. That's 6 weeks where you get to use the tools in your family and bring them and work with an instructor on it. So if you're having issues with any of the tools, you're not quite sure how to apply it to your situation, it's fantastic. But also Stay Listening is a big element of it. And there is $100 off that starter class, and it's all online and you can take it anytime this year. So as long as you kind of buy it before the end of February, you have the year to take it, and it is truly, truly amazing experience to work with an instructor, get listening, and apply those tools to your own family. I'll put it in the show notes.
Awesome. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please leave us a review and a rating. We really appreciate it. And also subscribe so you are always up to date with the latest episode. Thank you guys so much for joining us. If you have questions for me directly, you can always reach me at realtimeparenting.com, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.